Hi, my name is Mike. The silence in the house is a new kind of heavy, a soundless pressure that has replaced the frantic, noisy chaos of the last 10 years. I am sitting alone in the living room, the space that used to hold the entirety of our shared life, now feeling like a meticulously staged set for a play that just ended mid-act. The separation is real, physically realized by the space between us, but the mental severing is still a work in progress, slow and agonizing. Every quiet moment is filled with the echo of betrayal, two distinct, sharply painful reverberations. It wasn't just one mistake, it was a repetition, a pattern that she claims to have broken, but which I cannot unsee. The discovery of the second affair felt less like a shock and more like the final, definitive punctuation mark at the end of a very long, tragic sentence. We had been together for a decade, married for 8 years, no children to complicate the geometry of our split, yet the severance feels like hacking through 10 years of tightly wound roots. This time, I found the evidence myself, texts and media that laid bare a connection she had cultivated right under my nose. The sheer audacity of it, again with a coworker, someone she saw 5 days a week, made the air feel thin. The office, which should have been a mundane professional space, had been turned into a secret stage for her emotional and potentially physical life. She saw this man every day, exchanging casual pleasantries with him in front of colleagues, while simultaneously crafting an intimate, illicit world through their screens. This double life, the ease with which she maintained the facade, chills me to my core. It speaks to a level of compartmentalization I never knew she possessed, or maybe a capacity for deception I had simply chosen to ignore until it became undeniable. She insists, with a newly acquired desperate sobriety, that this latest liaison was not physical. It was, she pleads, confined entirely to messages, pictures, and videos, a digital affair, nothing more. But the messages I found were explicit, referencing sexual acts with a level of detail that makes her denial laughably transparent. It's the trickler, truthing all over again, the slow, agonizing drip of half-confessions designed to minimize damage and preserve a sliver of her perceived innocence. The texts were clear, referencing desires that had been simmering, and she had admitted to making the first move, stating she had always known there could be something between them. That particular admission, the quiet acknowledgement of a premeditated emotional vulnerability, stung more than any description of physical acts. It suggested that she walked into that job, into our marriage, with a little escape hatch already mentally installed. When I confronted her, she used the lack of solid, visible proof, no credit card receipts for hotels, no eyewitness accounts, as her final shield. She knows I have the full transcript of their texts, but she leverages the gray area, trying to downplay the depth of the betrayal to save face, to leave herself a slightly less scorched path to reconciliation. Even if I were to grant her the impossible benefit of the doubt, that it remained solely digital, the emotional and verbal intimacy they shared was a more profound violation of our covenant than a single, regrettable physical encounter. She chose him as her confidant, her sexual sounding board, and her escape, all while sharing my bed. The betrayal was ongoing, not just a past event. I saw messages where they discussed how their non-collegial status, since she had recently left that toxic job, would allow them to be more free. They were already making plans to meet up while I was scheduled to be out of town soon. That detail, the strategic planning around my absence, was a knife twist of cold calculation. It meant the affair was not ending. It was simply transitioning from a workplace secret to a clandestine arrangement, a clear indication that her denial of a physical component was a meticulously crafted lie designed to buy her time and temper my rage. The recollection of the first affair, which happened a few years ago, feels like looking at the structural crack in a dam I foolishly tried to repair with duct tape. That time, too, it was an emotional connection with a coworker. The signs were softer then, easier to dismiss as innocent camaraderie until the late nights, the secretive phone habits, and the emotional distance became undeniable. I remember the sickly sweet relief mixed with crushing despair when she finally confessed to meeting up with him. She minimized it immediately, offering me the smallest possible dose of truth. They only kissed. I don't know why I believed her then, or why I thought I could heal that wound. Perhaps it was the sheer force of 10 years of shared history, the comfortable inertia of a settled life, or the deep, ingrained fear of being alone. I took a deep breath, swallowed the jagged pill of her half-truth, and tried to move forward. I convinced myself that people make mistakes, that she was struggling, that our love was strong enough to absorb the blow. But the damage never fully healed, and the scar tissue was constantly irritated. I was able to rationalize the affair as a symptom of her personal crisis, a desperate reaching out, but I could never, ever get past the lying and deceit that surrounded it. Every single thing she had told me about her day, her friends, her activities, was suddenly cast in a new, suspicious light. I became a reluctant detective in my own marriage, constantly searching her eyes for the telltale hesitation, the slight shift in narrative that would confirm my worst fears. I sincerely doubt, to this day, that I ever got the full truth about the extent of that first infidelity. The nagging voice of suspicion never truly left, it just learned to whisper more quietly. That whisper became the soundtrack to our relationship, a low-frequency hum of distrust beneath every shared meal and every quiet evening on the couch. I had given her my forgiveness and my commitment, but she had kept the truth locked away, and that, more than anything, poisoned the well of our life together. The years following the first affair became an exhausting, relentless demonstration of the toll her struggles took on us both. Her depression, anxiety, and battle with alcohol, all amplified by a toxic, soul-crushing job, created an emotional black hole in our home. I became her emotional punching bag, the designated receptacle for every frustration, every moment of self-loathing, every bad day she endured. She treated me like a doormat, walking over my needs and feelings with a casual cruelty that seemed to spring from her own internal chaos. I remember coming home from my own demanding workday, mentally prepared to offer support, only to be met with a storm of misplaced anger or a heavy, resentful silence. My attempts to offer constructive solutions to her anxiety or gentle suggestions about her drinking were frequently met with explosive defensiveness. I learned, through painful trial and error, that any expression of my own sadness, exhaustion, or frustration was immediately invalidated or turned against me. My feelings simply did not matter in the economy of our marriage, only hers held any currency. The weight of trying to hold our fractured marriage together became almost unbearable. I was constantly walking on eggshells, performing a subtle, daily dance of emotional calibration, terrified of saying the wrong thing. My biggest fear was pushing her towards self-harm, a threat that had been subtly, or sometimes explicitly, introduced into our arguments over the years. This fear gave her immense, silent power. It meant that I sacrificed my own voice, my own emotional needs, in the name of her stability. I became her keeper, her therapist, her silent partner, anything but her husband. This continuous martyrdom created a cavernous distance between us, a loneliness that no amount of physical proximity could alleviate. I was in the marriage, performing the duties of a spouse, but I was emotionally isolated, essentially single within the confines of a shared address. I carried the entire emotional load, the bills, the cleaning, the social calendar, and the immense burden of her volatile moods, until my own tank was utterly empty. The man who had started this journey with her 10 years ago, full of hope and resilient love, had been slowly hollowed out, replaced by a weary caregiver who barely recognized himself. Adding to this profound emotional void was the stark, physical reality of our intimacy. In the 10 years we had been together, we had never had full intercourse, not once. The barrier, which she had been diagnosed with years ago, was vaginismus, a condition that made penetration extremely painful or impossible. It was a physical issue, yes, but it became a massive, unaddressed symbol of the distance and isolation in our marriage. I had tried to be patient, to be understanding for years. I read books, suggested non-penetrative alternatives, and assured her that my love wasn't contingent on sex. But patience, I learned, is a finite resource when it's met with perpetual inaction. I spent a decade navigating a marriage that felt perpetually incomplete, constantly suppressing a fundamental, human need for physical connection and validation. The void it created was enormous, a black hole in the very center of our union that sucked all the light and joy out of our romantic life. I made it clear, numerous times, just how big of an issue this was for me. I explained that it wasn't just about the act itself, but about the profound level of intimate sharing, the physical expression of commitment and desire that was simply missing. Her response, for the longest time, was a passive acknowledgement, a quiet deferral that never translated into action. She never made the appointments, never followed through with the therapy, never truly prioritized solving the issue that was silently, relentlessly eroding the foundation of our life together. It is this specific decade-long lack of effort, this unwillingness to seek help for a physical condition that had such a massive emotional impact on me, that makes her current change feel so incredibly bitter. She has finally acknowledged how significant the issue has been. She says she's ready now, seriously ready to seek treatment for vaginismus, to begin bridging that decade-long physical gap. But that revelation, that commitment to change, arrives only after the second affair, only after I have physically moved out, only when the marriage is in terminal decline. The timing feels less like a breakthrough and more like a panicked, last-ditch attempt at self-preservation. I look at her newfound resolve and can't help but feel a hollow echo in my chest. It is too late. And yet, the very thing I had silently, desperately wished for over the last few years has finally materialized, creating the perfect, agonizing conflict. For the first time in what feels like an eternity, she appears genuinely, profoundly serious about changing. This isn't the tearful, momentary remorse that followed the first affair. This feels different, more grounded, more sustained. She has taken decisive action, not just made promises. She left the toxic environment of her previous employment and started a new job, one she describes as healthy, supportive, and manageable. The difference in her demeanor, even in the midst of our separation, is noticeable. The constant, low-grade anxiety that used to make her jumpy and irritable seems to have receded. More critically, she has stopped drinking. She says she's done, having finally faced the reality of how her alcohol use amplified her anxiety and fueled her reckless behavior. This newfound sobriety is a massive, tangible change, one that directly addresses a core destructive force in our life. Crucially, she is actively pursuing therapy now, not just scheduling it. She is finally putting in the work, addressing the underlying issues of depression and anxiety that turned me into her emotional shield and punching bag. She insists that these changes are not solely motivated by a desperate attempt to win me back, but that she wants to be better for herself, to reclaim her own sense of identity and stability. Her remorse feels real, deeply etched onto her face, and she repeats the only words that truly give me peace. She understands if I don't want to move forward, but she wants to do whatever she can, for however long it takes, to try and rebuild. She has finally, fully surrendered to the consequences of her choices. This sudden, comprehensive effort is a perfect mirror image of the woman I always hoped she would become, the partner I had waited for through years of neglect and pain. But my internal response is muted, almost numb. The relief I should feel is overshadowed by a deep, weary cynicism. It's like standing at the finish line of a marathon, having carried an impossible weight for 26 miles, only to have the person who was supposed to be running with you suddenly sprint the last mile unencumbered. The effort is appreciated, but the timing is an insult to the journey I endured alone. The truth is, I don't know if I have the emotional energy left to engage with this new, improved version of her. I feel like the Elias she is now trying to court has already gone, detached emotionally years ago in a slow, necessary act of self-preservation. That man, the one who held onto a fragile, flickering ember of hope, finally let go long before I found the second batch of messages. I had already made a quiet, definitive plan in my mind. I would give the marriage until next year. If the circumstances, the job, the drinking, the cruelty, didn't change by then, I was going to file for divorce. The discovery of the second affair simply accelerated an ending that was already written. I had been holding on to hope for so long, clinging to the idea that external circumstances were the primary problem. I told myself that a new job would alleviate her stress, that sobriety would clear her mind, and that a stable mental state would bring back the compassionate woman I married now. Those changes are actually happening, but I am too far gone. The years of carrying the weight, of being perpetually misunderstood and betrayed, have created an immense emotional canyon between us. I stood on the edge of that chasm for a long time, waiting for her to step across, and when she didn't, I turned my back and started walking toward the light. I look at the beautiful, earnest, sober woman she is presenting now, and I realize she is offering me a future, but she cannot give me back the past. She cannot erase the endless nights of silent tears, the constant self-censorship, or the profound loneliness of the last decade. She is asking me to forgive the cumulative damage of 10 years of emotional abuse and 2 betrayals, and to reinvest my entire self, my trust, my hope, and my emotional capital into a project that has failed spectacularly twice before. The price of admission to this potential reconciliation is too high. It requires me to willingly step back into a state of permanent vulnerability. I don't know if I'll ever be able to trust her again, truly trust her. Trust isn't just a switch you flip. It's a delicate, complex structure built brick by brick. She systematically demolished that structure, first by the affairs and second, and perhaps more fundamentally, by the pattern of lying, minimizing, and trickle-truthing. How can I ever look at her phone without suspicion? How can I believe her when she says she's going out with friends? Every single future plan we make will be clouded by the possibility that she has an escape plan ready, a contingency for dissatisfaction already loaded into her contacts. I simply don't know if I want to live the rest of my life in the shadow of that doubt. So I am left standing at this impossible crossroads, staring at two paths, both utterly terrifying. Do I take this as the real second chance, the one I spent years pleading for, and try to rebuild a future with the partner who has finally done the impossible work? The part of me that is loyal, that remembers the good times, that fears the unknown of starting over, wants to lean into the hope she offers. It's the easier, more familiar path, the one that avoids the upheaval of divorce and the loneliness of a new beginning. But the vast, overwhelming majority of me, the 97% certainty that feels like a physical ache in my bones, wants to walk away. It feels like an act of profound self-respect to finally choose myself. It's the realization that she spent 10 years dragging me through the mud, and only now, when she faces losing me forever, has she decided to clean up. I can't reconcile on the hope that so many things, trust, intimacy, mutual respect, need to change for me to be happy. The required transformation is not just hers, it's the near impossible task of rebuilding my emotional core and my ability to be vulnerable with her. I've expressed all of this to her, laid out the full, crushing weight of my exhaustion and my doubt. She is not fighting me, she is conceding the point. She understands that fixing things will take something near impossible, that it will demand years of effort on her part, and that even then, the outcome may still not be satisfactory to me. Her honesty about the difficulty is a new and painful maturity, but it doesn't change the equation. Why should I commit years of my limited emotional life to a reconciliation that is statistically likely to fail and will, even if successful, forever carry the taint of betrayal? I deserve a marriage where I am not a caregiver or a victim, but a partner. I deserve a future where I don't have to scan text for evidence, or walk on eggshells, or suppress my own needs in the name of peace. This choice is no longer about her potential, or her change. It's about my survival. Walking away isn't quitting. It's finally, after a decade of self-sacrifice, choosing to live. The silver lining is the house. The significant equity we've built provides a clean financial break, a tangible foundation for a new start. The thought of selling it, dividing the assets, and simply starting fresh, perhaps in a new city or a smaller, simpler place, feels like taking my first deep, unburdened breath in 10 years. I feel the fear, of course. I'm so used to being pushed around, to having my reality distorted and my feelings minimized, that I second-guess this instinct for self-preservation. Am I making a mistake because I'm letting bitterness blind me to a genuine miracle of transformation? Am I rejecting the very thing I always prayed for simply because it arrived late? But the counter-argument is simple and powerful. I gave everything, and she took it for granted twice. My obligation now is not to her redemption, but to my own peace. The time for hoping she would change is over. The time for healing myself has finally arrived. My 97% certainty feels earned, forged in the fires of 2 betrayals and 10 years of emotional starvation. I need to trust that feeling, to stop looking for reasons to stay and start embracing the reasons I need to go. I need to walk away knowing that I gave absolutely everything I could, until there was nothing left to give, and that is enough. The next step, however frightening, must be the one I take alone toward a future defined by my own needs, my own truth, and my own quiet, honest peace.